Welcome to the Come Home podcast, where we connect with experts, leaders, researchers, and advocates dedicated to excelling in emotional intelligence, human development, and social impact. Together, we explore the world of human potential, sharing insights, experiences, and the transformative work happening in these fields. I'm Griffin Gervais, founder of Come Home, where we partner with educational organizations and institutions to revolutionize education through emotional intelligence. On this podcast, our mission is to inspire, educate, and empower listeners to leverage emotional intelligence for personal growth and collective impact. Today, I am honored to be joined by Mario Shaw, founder and CEO of Messy Roots. Mario is originally from Cleveland, Ohio. Shout out Cleveland. And his journey started as a middle school teacher, then led to co-founding Profound Gentlemen, which is a nonprofit dedicated to increasing the representation of Black male teachers, and now Messy Roots, which is a community that offers services to grow current and aspiring BIPOC leadership coaches for social impact, where they imagine a world where leaders of color have access to coaches and resources to continue growing in the art of leadership coaching. Mario?
That sounds so good.
Welcome.
Yes, I'm excited.
That sounded good?
It sounded great. I got my, since I'm, coming home, I got my eyebrows done for the first time ever.
There you go.
Yeah.
And now you're gonna
look bright.
Now it's gonna be all over YouTube.
I know, right? And I got my hair lined up. I said, I literally got a haircut this morning.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited to dive in. Obviously, given your background and the alignment in our work, leadership and leadership development and leadership representation. I'm excited to dive into all that with you. For people tuning in and listening, you might see us on each other's platform. There's a lot of shared community members that we've connected with, and we've had these conversations so often off camera. And I'm really excited to just dive in with you on camera.
Yes.
And highlight the work that you're doing, because it's incredible what you're building and how you're supporting people. So the first question I always ask people when we sit down to talk is, obviously, my company, my organization is called Come Home. When you hear Come Home, what does that mean to you?
So I think, I'm automatically starting off thinking about just my journey that I've just been having over the past month. October, I've just been everywhere. Yeah. Like, I have not been in my physical home space. I've been in Chicago, Hawaii, and just came back 48 hours ago from Ghana. And I've done this for about 10 years. And so I recognize that coming home for me is a kind of like as a metaphor for my heart, in terms of I'm coming back to that center, versus a physical location. So I try to say, like, home is where the heart is, right? And so I try to actually model that. So that's what home is for me, coming back to that center and trying to do that work daily.
Sure. I like that. It resonates with me a lot too, because I think, in the name Come Home for my company, it's about that. It's about that center. It's about that knowingness, that understanding of self. But the other aspect of it, I believe, the other most critical piece of it is, to your point that you just said about traveling. It's okay, now that you're home, now where does it go, right? Where does that get to show up? Where does that get to be? So much of this work, so much of what's rooted in emotional intelligence is not just what you do for yourself, but then it's about how does it impact others? How does it impact your community? How does it impact your relationships, your coworkers, your teams, etc.? So I love that, even for you in that brief month that you just have had, it's about understanding yourself, but also a great representation of you are actually moving.
Yes. Yeah, it definitely is moving. And I think, like, And I think this is great for even when you're thinking about listeners of your podcast, you know, and definitely also my reflection after coming back from Ghana, being a Black American, right? I think that, and Black queer American, I think oftentimes that, and I put this on my Instagram page the other day, but oftentimes like going to Ghana, for many of us is idea is for us to come home, go back to that place. And actually Ghana actually had that as a part of their slogan, was the year of return, to come back to that, you know what I mean? And so I thought that it was really good for folks to be able to experience Ghana, experience that coast, right? Of those who were enslaved, where they come from, and to have that energy, right? But then you recognize too that at the same time that the folks who live in Ghana, the Ghanaians are more so our cousins, our brothers, our sisters. But this is theoretically, this is still not our home, right? Like as Black Americans, it's almost like if we have mutated into this new different, thing, right? And so sometimes being here also in America doesn't feel like that neither, right? That this is our home. And so for many Black Americans, specifically myself, I have felt like that there has never been a physical location for me that I can actually call my own, right? And so specifically as a Black queer American, even further with the intersections and the isms of it all, you really start to feel like, okay, there is, I have to establish that home for myself.
So I like that reflection, and I'm excited, and for people listening, and maybe they'll even continue to speak to it in our conversation. You just came back from what seems like a very transformative.
It was very transformative
trip.
Yes.
So I'm excited to see, even when you're thinking about supporting the people within Messy Roots, and the leaders within Messy Roots, how some of your reflections and experiences that you just had that are probably really real and raw. I'm excited to see how they show up in our conversation today. The other piece of it, and what I hear you talking about too, is just this idea of really navigating like identity. Right? Like where do you find yourself aligning to and with? Right? How do you then start to establish that? And also, like, how do you find others around you that also, because I know you and I both believe this, but we're always stronger in numbers, and it's like, so where does that community live, right? Can I foster it within myself? But then so much again of this work going out is, okay, let me go start to find those pieces of where all this exists. How does it go out? So
oh man, that's awesome. And this is definitely the thoughts about Ghana, and even coming, because I had only spent 36 hours after Hawaii. I had got on a plane and then went to Ghana, so it was all about combining both of that, right? Like the Polynesian and Hawaii, that being indigenous land to the Polynesians, and then in Ghana, the Ghanaians, and that being their indigenous land. So really just thinking about land, right? And our connection with land, our connection with home ownership, right? And what that looks like. And what I realized is that obviously we are on borrowed time. We are, and I don't like to really say that. I think we are on lived time more than borrowed time. No, because it's like sometimes it's like we over here, we just, I don't know, we just utilize that phrase and don't know what it means. But it relates to me, all of that relates to just time. That's what I really kind of like wanted to get to. Like the experience that you have that you have is nothing but time. That's the one thing that you can't get back. But I do believe that when we leave this earth, that is the thing that we take with us, right? So an example of that is when I was in Ghana, we visit this coffin factory where these folks made these coffins, right? Like when you die. But these coffins were super unique because they were made actually to look like your profession, whatever you did on earth. then they would make this coffin to represent that. Because the Ghanaians who are Christian based, they believe that once you die, that in the afterlife you are still doing the work that you did while you were here. So how do you actually continue to do how are you doing the work here? This is really the preparation for that, right? And I love that. Maya Angelou talked about that when you die, it's just a continuation, right? Like when you think about you coming from infancy stage to when you getting older, your body changes, right? Yeah. So like it's just when you die, it's just another evolution of your consciousness, of your soul. So it's important for you to be really aware of what you're doing. Right, and those experiences matter. So when I die, hopefully, that coffin, I'm thinking hopefully it'll be an elephant. I don't know. I didn't do any work in elephant work, but part of it is because they say that only royal people could, if you was the chief or something, you could only have elephant, an eagle, or a lion. You can't. If other people can't even have an elephant, an eagle, or a lion.
I take a lion.
I know, right? I would do a lion or an elephant.
Come on, you're a big Lion King fan.
I know, but I love elephants even more. Like if Lion King was the Elephant King, I mean, that would have been perfect. So I bring this together because the work that we do could be so overwhelming, right? But if we are very specific in the work that we're doing, then it becomes simplified, and we say, hey, my journey on this earth is really to just do this and contribute to this. It's okay, and I'm all right to be overwhelmed with all of the things that need to be done and the collaborative effort that needs to take place. My role then is to bring my gift to the table based off of what I am good at. So that, again, that coffin image, that symbol of when I die, right? Based off of whatever it is. I still don't like leadership coaching. Maybe it's I don't know what it represented. but whatever I do on earth and the experiences I have on earth is carried with me to whatever is next, so that I can contribute back to the living that's doing this work, right? So that's how I see it.
Yeah. And I can align with what you're saying, and I'm gonna try to paraphrase or fill in some things that I'm thinking about. And I want to tie it specifically to the work Messy Roots does with the current and aspiring BIPOC leaders that you serve. So one of the things I'm thinking about when I hear you talk about this is purpose, right? Being extremely purposeful, being intentional, showing up to do work that really aligns with a greater mission or a greater vision that you see, right? And I know I'm talking very broad, but kind of that idea.
The overarching,
right? Right. And being able to tease out all of those little things in terms of skill set, in terms of beliefs, values, right? Experiences, journeys, in order to create this path towards that vision. Right? Very purposeful. And so that's kind of where I think about it, because in what you're describing, and also I think some of the conversations we've had too, is really around this idea of, as a leader, as someone who's growing within their career, how do you really continue to bring your full self to the work that you do, right? Instead of this, here's who I am here, here's who I am here, which is so much of the story that has just been told, right? Home, life, work life, and it's like, no. Who you are holistically is actually best served in this role. So is there alignment in what I'm sharing to kind of the work that you guys do at Messy Roots? And if so, what are some things that you guys do at Messy Roots that really gets people to, I guess, know themselves holistically?
Yeah, no, that is so good. So I do believe in what you actually are saying, because the leaders who know themselves are the ones that typically are connected to going back to the home, right? They're connected to the heart. And so the work that we do in Messy Roots in order to help people to really do the leadership work and the self-work is storytelling. It just starts with there. No AI can tell you your story, right? Like, if you ask AI, hey, tell me my story, they can help to curate the story, right? Like they can say, okay, tell me the date you were born, you know what I mean? Or tell me this, which is great. I actually think that's a great idea to be able to use AI to be able to help you to tell your story. But without feeding it the information, it will never be able to tell your story. You are the only one that can be able to do that because it's in your head, right? We have not created a device that can compute what you're thinking or take all of your memories, like Inside Out, the movie, take all of your memories, take them all out, and then sort them to be able to make a story. You have to do that sorting work, right? So one of the things I've been really focusing on lately, actually, for myself, is, I don't know why, but like in 6th grade, I used to be an outside kid. I used to love being outside, but in 6th grade...
Now Mario's an inside guy.
Right. But in 6th grade, I started... Actually, I'm back outside. But in 6th grade, for some reason, when I turned 12, I went... and I grew up in Cleveland. I grew up in a lower middle class neighborhood. Majority of the people on my street, owned their house. And this is majority Black. This story is really interesting to me because it had just recently been something that has come up for me and it has impacted the way that I have saw my leadership. In 6th grade, 12 years old, I stopped going outside just randomly. And I never stopped, and I never went back outside. Meaning like just back outside and playing with my friends. I used to love being outside and playing with my friends, but I realized something just stopped me from doing that. But I never stopped playing though. I've always continued to use my hands. And what I realized is that I was using my hands to do something very different. That at that pivotal moment, there was these diverging paths that I was taking and the rest of my friends were taking, unfortunately. So I was taking a path where I was using my hands to think about how to do good. So I got deeper into artwork. I got deeper into playing tennis, all of these different things. Whereas my friends, they unfortunately got into some of the gang life. Some of them died. Like I hate to say it, some of the stereotypical things, right? And so I wondered that if I was to stay outside, but I have used my hands for, these particular different reasons instead. So, and I realized that and I'm using them now, but I realized that I continue to use my hands is the way that we navigate and the way that we are able to experience, again, going back to experiencing the world. It's the way that I've been able to build things. I think the number one thing that I would call myself, any title, would be artist, right? Because I love drawing. I love utilizing my hands to create things. So that has really lately, for me, the latest story that has shaped my leadership journey, has shaped the way that I have been able to see the world.
What is that? I'm curious. You today, being able to bring clarity or start to wrap your head around that story. And understanding the big moment, understanding the road, the paths you were able to choose, choosing one, and definitely not consciously, right? Probably just this subconscious thought, but now reflecting back, looking at it, thinking about still the idea of play and using your hands. How does that impact now how you show up as a leader within Messy Roots?
Well, that's the thing, and I think I'm still navigating that. I have therapy actually right after this conversation, which is great. And I think but part of it is that when people ask me why Messy Roots, and it's on our page, that we believe that you need to get your hands dirty as leaders, and that it gets messy with the roots, right? In order to get the roots, you got to dig through dirt, right? You have to use your hands to do it, and so it's just going back to that. It's going back to the roots, like the things that we see, right? The external part of the plant, the green part is only evident, and you're able to only see that because it has strong roots, because of its root system, because of you watering the plant. You know, if you was to only water the leaves, right, the plant will actually die. So we have to do the inside work. And that's that come home that we continue to talk about, right? And it's like cleaning that up. I lately have been actually, and it has been a fun project. I have lately switched. I have a lot of plants in my house.
I was going to say, for people tuning into this conversation, I'm going to drop all of Mario's info for you to follow along with him. But you need to go check out some of his stuff, because your entire apartment is just filled with plants.
Yes, which makes it actually humid and makes it hot. So funny thing is, right now my house is like hot, while the rest of the world is like, it's 55 degrees outside, and I'm still having to like turn on the AC or run a fan. But one of the things I've been transitioning to because of my allergies is that clay pebbles, or they call it leca or leca. I always mess it up. But there's these small little clay pebbles. I have been transitioning all of my plants from soil to leca because it's just better for my allergies, right? And I'm noticing, right, that some of the plants, some of the leaves are dying off as I transition to it, because it has to get used to it, right? And so it's this process that is going through, that when you change this home from one place to the next, right, that there's this dying off of old things that must happen, right? Like certain things is not going to make it in the process. So I think that's something that I'm doing with leadership right now, is as we are transitioning to, or as we're working with leaders, right, where we're coaching them, there is this transition from one pot to the next, or one medium of soil, or of one plant growth medium, whether that be soil or leca, that you're transitioning to, and people experience that dying, but they're not recognizing that actually this is going to be better for you. This is what's going to create so much growth for you, but there must be this dying off process. So that's something that I'm recognizing right now in the process of leadership is messy. We got to tend to the roots, and there's all of these things that's happening in the roots.
There's one thing from that I want to come back to, and hopefully I can remember it. But the other thing that I feel like there's alignment in the support that we do at Come Home, and the work that you're doing with Messy Roots, is we don't approach it from this lens of what's the other thing, right? I think a lot of people do that. I think whether you're part of an organization or you're part of your own development, it's all about kind of outside of me, what's that extra piece? What's that new thing I have to add? All this, especially within schools and within corporate, right? It's always about what's that new initiative? What's that new thing? And it piles on. But what I'm hearing and what you're saying in terms of thinking about the picture of a plant, right? And getting your hands messy and going to the roots, you're actually coming from this idea of we have to do less. Right? It's not about more stuff. It's about we need to just pause. We need to take inventory, and we need to start looking really deep down. Getting our hands messy. So that's something cool, and I think that's such a sustainable and successful, and I hate to just throw out another word, but empowering approach to it. Because when you lessen it for people, and you start to give them skills just to navigate with what they're working with, you feel really good. It's like, oh, I can handle that. I can do that. My question for you though is, right, what you're talking about is taking and using the metaphor of a plant, going from one planter to the next, knowing growth is going to be different, knowing soil might need to be different, sunlight, water, right? Whole new approach. A lot of change.
Yeah.
So in your experience working with leaders, or just kind of how you support, what does it look like, and how are people's experience navigating change?
Oh, so good. Yeah, I think, that's a really, first, I love how you just frame all of this to get to this question, because it really is true about simplifying the work.
Yeah.
And part of that is the change, right? The change right now is that I think that we have been doing a lot of things and not focus on just that one thing that you're actually good at, and how do we actually just grow that. There are so many things that we need to do to make the world a better place. I do think that the world is good. We need to do better, right? Sure. Like, I think we hyper focus a lot on the negative stuff. Sure. And then we don't do a lot of focusing on like the things that's actually working. So the people are like, this world is terrible. And I'm like, no, it's actually going well. But we need to do more. Yeah. So the change that is happening is for people to relinquish their control and to really focus actually on the one thing that they are actually good at, and being okay with offering help. I think the part that people are scared of when it comes to change is the fact that change requires you to say that I need help. It requires you to say that. And when you simplify your work, it also requires you to say that I need help. So therefore, I as a entrepreneur, as a leadership coach, I am great with leadership coaching. One of the things that I love to do is grow. Like the one thing I am really great at is growing leaders through storytelling, but also through the tools that they use to be good leaders.
Sure.
And one of those tools that is really hyper focused is succession planning, because when you're done with your work, right, or you transition from one job to the next, as millennials, as Gen Zs, we are great at job hopping, which I don't think is a bad thing.
Sure.
But how are we providing the succession for our successor to be able to take over that thing and actually be able to continue to do the work? We don't do a good job at that at all now with that. That's why we have to simplify the work, because once we get to a succession and we start writing out all the things that we do, when we pass it on to somebody, they say, what is this, right? And people are like, I don't want to do all of this. Or like, this should have been done with two, three people. Again, change requires you to be able to look inside of yourself and say, actually, I'm only good at this thing. So if my client, for example, I only want to be good at these things, storytelling tools for leaders to grow in their work and succession planning, then that means if my leader asks me about relationships, or like when we talked about, ask about SEL, because we don't do the full emotional stuff, we just hit it, and then we say, okay, for folks to go deeper into this, we would love for them to go to Griffin to talk about even more of the emotional stuff. Then that's what we need to do. We don't need to say, okay, let's also be good at this and let's also be good at that. I don't want to be a big box store, right? Because a big box store does not provide a curated experience, right? Apple is, to me, and I think about this, Apple versus Microsoft. I think that, or Android. Android has way better products than Apple, hands down, right? Like, hands down, their technology is better, all these things. Now, I'm an Apple person.
Okay.
The curated experience, though, that Apple provides is, like, when I ask an Android user to share an experience with me of going to get their phone, or what does Android stand for, or all of these different things, they're not able to explain it, right? Because Android represents Samsung and all of these different products. It's so many things, so many different brands that fit under that label of Android. When I go to Apple, the only thing that is under Apple is Apple. It's a very curated experience.
Yeah.
So, and Apple's job is to, like, literally their job is to make artists and creators' jobs easier, right?
Sure.
Which is why when you have to go to the Apple store, you're angry because you're like, your job was to make my life easier. I always see this every time I go to the Apple store. It's like people are so angry that their product is not working because the purpose of Apple was to make the thing great, right? Like, so that's the change. Change isn't easy because it does require help. And Apple does a great job at that. They say, we want to do the creative part of this.
Yeah.
Like, they own the intellectual property of Apple Intelligence now, right? But little do we know that Apple, the person who actually makes the framing of their phones or their products is actually Samsung, right? Like, it's not Apple itself. Because Apple says, we're going to be good at this specific thing. We're just not and we're going to outsource those other things so that this specific thing is going to be a curated experience. So change requires help. And I think that's what leaders are more so scared of, is to reach out to say, hey, I don't want to be good at this. I'm going to reach out to you to do this.
Yeah. Which makes a lot of sense when you think about it, right? Because, tying those pieces together, you understand your story so well.
Yeah.
That you understand strengths, areas of growth. You kind of full circle start to understand who you are, right? Not that you can't develop and continue to grow and work on skills. We both know, and a lot of us know, skills can be developed. It's a muscle. You just have to work on it. But it gets really important as you continue to grow and lead, because then you know where to put your energy. You know, hey, I can handle X, Y, and Z because this is kind of my zone of genius, right?
I love that word.
And then, okay, I'm going to need blank person on my team. One of the best examples that I've used before is my style of leading and just how my brain functions and operates is I'm that visionary person. I can paint every little detail of what it looks like, and for me, that's a strength, and that's a strength within an organization. That's a strength within a partnership, because I'm able to zoom us out and hold the theme and the thread the entire time. Where I always need to lean on people is who's that very detailed oriented step person that's going to pull me down and go, hey, right? But I share that example because I had to understand that and know that about myself, so that when it came to building a team, I had the right people around me who we were all going to be able to do that. Right? Very important that you're able to tie that piece together, because if you don't, then you're sitting in a room or you're doing things with other people who are all thinking and operating like the same, and you're just spinning your wheels in circles because nothing's actually moving.
That's real. So you have to know what you are good at.
I forgot the other part. There's another part to that.
I know you
said
said
we'll get back. There's another. It'll come back. It'll randomly pop up, and I'll be like, oh, okay. But the other thing I want to ask you is, why leaders? You know, when it comes to the work that you guys do at Messy Roots and all of this storytelling, why leaders?
So one of the things I tell organizations when they partner with us, so we get like business, right? So we get organizations to say, hey, we want you to provide coaching tools for 9 of our folks, right? Where they want to get coached to become coaches and utilize it for their management style. And sometimes they'll say, you know, we want to be able to retain these leaders. And I say, well, my job is to not retain them. My job is to not keep these leaders at your organization. Our job as leaders is to grow them. And so the reason why we focus on leaders is because I believe in the leadership circle of life or matrix type of thing where you don't have to bring in a line from somewhere. But I do believe in leadership circle of life where if I am, and I did this, so when I was in Profound Gym, I had a team of 30. Okay. Right? And they were majority part-time, but I used to tell them all the time, my job is not to keep you, my job is to grow you. Yeah. Hopefully the culture keeps you, right? Sure. But me personally as a leader, my job is to
your celebration is when they
could go off. Like the thing is, if we was doing this right, sure, right? Like if we was literally doing this right, you should be able to go to your boss and say, hey, I'm applying for this job, right? I want you to write a recommendation letter for me. Yeah. Because your current boss should be the best person to write a recommendation. But instead what's happening is that you have to sneak and go do the interview and do all of these different things, right? Sure. Like, no, this should be a plan where the leader and I used to do this with my folks too. I used to be like, it's time for you to transition. Yeah. I have nothing else that I can provide for you. So I want us to start looking at what other opportunities are available and out there that you could be able to contribute, because the role is never about the organization, it's always about the leader. Yeah. The work is carried by the leader. An organization is not going to function itself. Yeah. So I love the fact that whenever, again, I tell those businesses that come to us, I say, I am here to grow your leader, right? And by that, then they impact the organization. Sure. But there should be this circle of life, right? And this is why I believe in succession planning for sure, is that if that leader does leave, they have a document that they can provide to the next person. Yeah. So that this work can continue. Sure. The work itself can continue, right? Yeah. But the work is always going to look different based on what leader is actually doing that work. Yeah. So the succession plan is just the work. The succession plan is not necessarily the leadership within the leader within the work. Sure. It's simply a basic how to model. The leader has a vision for how that work should actually then be played out. So this is why we focus on leaders, because they, and this is what we have on our page, on Messy News page, we say people make the world go round. Yeah. Because you can't do it without people. Yeah. You can't. We can't never cancel out people.
I really like that, just the idea of pouring into the individuals that serve within the greater context, not from the lens though of like, hey, I'm gonna guarantee you're gonna keep them. It's more of like, no, we're gonna show up to serve the leaders based on who they are, where they're at, and where they want to go.
That's right. Yeah, and that's it. So if I'm coaching them and I realize, hey, it's really time for you to, like, there's nothing else within this org for you to be able to do. One, as coaches, we do a lot of recommendations, recommendation letters and recommending. So, like, honestly, and this is something that people are starting to notice and pick up, is that when people are looking for a person to fill a role, they are going to coaches. Like, I get so many job things now, like, hey, I'm looking for a person like this. Do you have any of your coachees that you're supporting that will fill that, right? Like, so I probably get about 5 to 7 job applications a week now. Wow. It's getting bigger and bigger because I know, based off of my coaching and work with them for 6 months, right? Because we haven't created a culture within organizations where the leader is okay with transitioning their team member, their direct reports onto somebody, but a coach is, right? I have no allegiance to that organization. I have allegiance to the leader. So, and that's what my coach did. That's how I even found out about going into leadership coaching. My coach connected me to scholarships so that I could be able to get my coaching certification. That's how I became a coach, right? Because I had a coach. Sure. So yeah, a good coach is connected to job opportunities. They're connected to, I get stuff, conference opportunities. Because and you got to be real specific about who you are coaching too.
Sure.
Right. So because they know I coach BIPOC leaders, and this is a BIPOC leadership organization. It's like, hey, we're looking for diversity. Hey, we're looking for we have this type of conference, and we want this type of person to speak at this event. Do you have people that can apply? Yeah.
And to that, you saying that triggered that other piece that I was going to say before, but it still ties in perfectly, right? You were giving the example of Microsoft or Android and Apple.
And Apple, yeah.
One of the things that I've used, and people who tune into this are going to hear this again, but one of the ways that I think about an organization is if you try to say you do it all, you become the walk-in clinic.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah,
so I'm thinking about it through the lens of like doctor.
Yeah.
Right?
I do this
you become
too.
You become the walk-in clinic.
Yeah.
So you have no idea who the doctors are.
No.
You don't know anything, but you're like, if I have like a sore throat, I guess I'll just show up there. Oh, if I, stub my toe or my wrist hurts, I'm just going to show up there. But you don't ever know who the person is. You just know like, I'm going to go to the walk-in. But when you have that specialized foot doctor, any person, any athlete, any whatever who has a foot issue, guess who they're going to? The foot doctor.
Yes.
Right? They're not going to the back doctor. They're not going to the arm doctor. They're going to the foot doctor.
Yes.
Now, that doctor could probably be like, well, I could do all of it, right? Given their experience. But no, they specialize in things related to feet or your foot.
Yes.
That's the exact same thing with our organizations being very clear, because that's how we create partnerships. That's how we create opportunities for people who are within our organizations. But then two, as the actual leader yourself, when you understand that specialty, you're not trying to do all of it. No. Going back, you're simplifying. You're simplifying. And when you're able to simplify like that, one, you start to build awareness and credibility around who you are, what you do, because people aren't confused by it. They're like, oh, it's this. And it becomes very actionable, because when it's simplified, you can take action. Because there's not 1,000 different directions to go. It's like, nope, I deal with feet.
That's it. I simply just deal with BIPOC leadership coaches. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I provide the tools for them to be great in their work. Yeah. That's it. That's it.
And I know that, and I know this is kind of off a little bit, but it relates, I think, for us as entrepreneurs and business owners who have backgrounds in education, right? I think that's what makes partnerships such a fun experience and easy to happen, because we all own what we know best, and we don't try to do all the different things. And it makes it easy when you're in conversation or building relationships with people, and hey, Messy Roots does this, Come Home does this organization does this, and you're clear, you can start to put those puzzle pieces together to support people.
That's right. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's it.
So I do want to ask you about specifically BIPOC leaders.
Yeah.
Because I know that's what your organization is committed to. That's the work that you really advocate for and want to do. What are some what kind of stood out maybe in your personal experience, or maybe even just research over time, but what really stood out that really showed maybe an inequity within leadership based on certain demographics?
Yeah, so I was listening to I forgot small business podcast.
Okay.
I was still leading Profound Gentlemen at the time. So I was again doing a small business podcast. I was listening to it, and I forgot the name of the co-partners, but I actually was able to connect with them. But there were two Black women on the call, and they were talking about one. That's how I found out about HoneyBook, that CRM system. But the host asked them about what are the two things that all entrepreneurs and business leaders really need, and she said one is a CRM system, and one is a coach, and two is a CRM system. And then I that was the first time I actually heard somebody else talk about coaching. And throughout my career in entrepreneurship and leading profiling gentlemen, I had a coach, and I loved it, and I saw the impact that it had on me to have a coach, to have somebody to sift through certain thoughts that I had. Sure. And then I had transitioned to this one coach that was more of I had one coach that was a part of my strategic planning, but then I ended up transitioning to another coach who was just solely a coach. And I saw that, again, that impact. And both of these folks are white. It was a white man. He was great. And then there was a white woman. She was awesome. She was a artist, and a coach. And her and I connected on this deep level. And I remember her telling me, man, I wish that, because at first I made it clear to her that I would have loved to have a coach of color, but her network within over 400 coaches, she was a part of a network, and even in that network there was only like 3, Black coaches, and so she was like, it's so hard to try to find this for you. Like, I know that you want this, and then eventually she said to me, she was like, well, what would it look like for you to become a coach? And that's, again, how I ended up getting into coaching, because she brought this up to me around me becoming a coach. Yeah. Because I started to have conversations with her around the inequities within even the system. Sure. But she was good. Then I started asking my friends who were also in leadership roles, do they have a coach? And they say, yeah, like, or no. Majority of them said no, and then the ones that said yeah, their coach didn't look like them, right? So I said, well, if we know with teaching that when a student has a teacher that looks like them, we're able to produce results because of their experiences. We're going back to experiences and that come home thing that we had originally talked about. Then we know that would be the same thing with coaching. If there are certain things that BIPOC leaders have experienced that perhaps certain BIPOC leadership coaches can be able to help them to navigate, without the BIPOC leader having to do a lot of the explaining for them. And again, with my coach, I did have to do some explaining to her because there were certain experiences that she just didn't have. Yeah. So with the BIPOC leader and a BIPOC coach, we're able to speed up that process because there's less of the explaining and there's more of the connection. So we're able to literally get a lot of the things done so that they could take the practice that they have within their coaching session and literally apply it to their leadership now. Yeah. So we see within BIPOC leadership coaching that leaders are able to move at a faster pace than if they was to have a white leadership coach, all because of those experiences and those connections. So it's less of the explaining, it's more of the doing. Sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and while you were saying that, I was constantly thinking about the idea of like representation.
Yes,
right?
yeah.
One of the things that I think about is books. Mm-hmm. Especially for children, right? Like how many people,
I love children's books.
how many students, for one reason or another, when it was talking about who do you want to be in life or what do you want to do when you grow up or all these different things, got such a limited range because of representation, maybe of representation of, educators in their school or teachers in their classroom or representation of characters in their books. And it's showing people, and I'm talking about children right now, but then we're talking about, high schoolers, college age kids, people getting into industry, aspiring leaders, to be able to look at people and go, wow, that person kind of represents what I look like, who I am, therefore that's possible.
It's possible.
Like, that's possible.
Yeah, you can actually do it. And so it gives them the ability to have to jump through less hoops, right? Because now I can be able to do it. Now, there is a piece of allyship that does happen, right? Where you kind of, I don't know what type of word I'm thinking about right now, but is it part of like what we focus on with upper mobility here in Charlotte is that part of it is connecting with multiple different people, right? Sure. You have access to certain things, right? So, and yes, Felicia, who, she's not in Charlotte, but I'm gonna give another example to connect to this upper mobility. Felicia Hatcher, who is like right now.
Shout out Felicia.
She's amazing. Like, she's Pharrell's, like right hand right now. But she's in the nonprofit space and really cool person. I got to know her through Echo and Green. She says that if your mentor only has conversations with you and not open up the Rolodex of connecting you to people, then they're not your mentor, right? Because part of mentorship is connecting you. If I'm telling you within our conversation that I need to be connected to Disney, and you know somebody that work at Disney, then you need to be doing one of two things, or both of these things. Sure. One, preparing me, if you don't believe that I'm ready as your mentor, preparing me to be able to have that conversation with Disney, and if you feel like I'm already prepared, then connecting me to Disney. That's mentorship, right? Sure. Mentorship and allyship have those same similarities, and this is what upper mobility is all about as well. And this is where in Charlotte, I think where we do the mentorship, right? But we forget about the other half, right? The open up my Rolodex of connection, right? Like of that, because you have connections and as allies, right? As a white person, it is just foundationally just stated that you have more opportunities to go through certain doors that I'm not able to go through, right? Sure. But then we call it Sankofa in our tradition is reach back to pull forward, is that once you do once that you do give, right? This is what Maya Angelou says in relation to Sankofa. Once you do give, once you learn, teach. And that's what you have to do as an ally. That moves you from an ally to an accomplice, or what other people will call a co-conspirator, because now you're offering those set of resources that I may not have access to. Sure. Right? So for example, my coach, she had access to those opportunities in coaching that I did not have access to. But her as a white woman did. And oftentimes what we see is that I'm only going to provide these tools and this access to people who look like me, right? Versus actually I'm going to provide these tools to people who don't look like me, open up my Rolodex and provide okay, this is who you said you need. Let me connect you to so-and-so. I'm seeing that a lot with entrepreneurs, and we're doing that better. Sure. I think that since 2016, definitely since 2020, I think it went like this. 2016 to 2020, we did good. The pandemic, we exacerbated it. And I think now we're trying to level it off. Because I think, and I love, man, the pandemic brought this sense of love, of connection. It was like none other. And then somehow, I think the reason why I say we leveling it, I hope they were leveling it rather than eliminating it. Sure. Because it felt so good. It felt like we was all connected because we all was at home. And we had to talk to ourselves at that time.
And even when you're saying that and you're thinking about it, and I try to do that as well. Like I'm always thinking about, if you're in my network, if you're in my space, maybe it's an ask or maybe it's something I pick up on, but who's the person that I need to introduce you to? Yes. But when, and I try to do it, and I probably fall short in some areas, but it's always something that I really try to like foundationally kind of root in, is supporting people. But to your point and to that whole idea, when we're doing that, there's such this collaborative process to all of it, right? There's no isolation. There's no one feeling like they're on their own. You almost start to form this support team and kind of like co-conspirators, like you said, like around you, which is, at that point, I always look at it as like every person wins in that scenario.
That's right. And we grow.
And we grow.
And
we grow quicker.
Yes. And the problem with the change, right? And this is what we're all experiencing, right? And what we're saying, and part of that change is we have to be okay with saying that we need help. We're going back to that because it really is all about the fact that if I am just good at like just this one thing, like I think about the idea of, baking a cake or whatever, right? Like I may grow wheat or flour, you know what I mean? Yeah. But you have chickens for eggs, right? Yeah. And this person over here uses X to create butter, right? Yeah. I have to go get these things. I think even with this is kind of sidebar level, even going with our food quality, right? Sure. We have too many like food businesses trying to do too many things for one people, for one and multiple food groups versus just saying, hey, I'm only going to focus on creating the best apples, right? Yeah. Because that is, I'm going to be great at that. Funny thing is what you start to see lately is that when a company focuses on a singular product, that's the company that we're starting to really lean ourselves more into because of the quality. Like Warby Parker, for example, is super simple. But we're only gonna be good at creating glasses. Yeah. Right? Like we're not gonna like go off and branch into this. So
I think about the idea when we say, hey, go grab me a Kleenex. They're not actually Kleenexes. They're tissues. But Kleenex has just solely focused on one specific thing. That now we just go.
We know what it is.
Oh, I need a Kleenex.
Kleenex. Right? And everything is not a Kleenex. Like the brand is called Kleenex, right? That's it. That's what you want to be able to do. And it's not about dominating. And this is something one thing that me and my friend, him and I literally just talked about this earlier. Is instead of say like, yes, we're gonna probably always still utilize this, but within our eternal hearts, we're gonna think about this word. Instead of saying owning the land, we're gonna say adopting the land, right? Because it really is not ours, right? And just like when you have a child or you adopt a child, right? When you adopt the child is not, from a Christian perspective or even just in general, the child is not your own. Your job is to nurture that thing so that the child could be able to become better and make a better thing in the world, right? So when we think about home ownership and coming home, right, like it's an adoption process. It's not necessarily this ownership type of thing. Sure. It goes back to like Pocahontas when she says you think you own whatever land you land on, right? Like you don't. You just don't, right? And for many people of color, this is again I go back to this piece is that going back to that come home, go back to what land is actually ours, right? There's this one lady who I met while in Ghana. She does her work here in the States though, but she takes land that once was trauma for enslaved people and create gardens out of them so that there is healing there, right? Sure. And our ancestors, these, even one of the most fascinating things for me, I love trees, and definitely in Crowder Mountain. Crowder Mountain actually was an enslaved place, and I love going to Crowder Mountain. The thing is too, is actually black owned. The enslaved actually bought it back. But when I think about the trees there, they took the last breath of our ancestors, right? That perhaps was even hung, right? Mm-hmm. So like this space, this area, right? Like there's something that connects us to that. And how do we then take it from a space of trauma to a place of healing, right? Yeah. For us to be able to feel. So we could grow gardens in certain locations that once perhaps were food deserts or food swamps, right? Mm-hmm. Where we can't, dare to to imagine, or our ancestors couldn't dare to imagine that this would be a place of healing now, right?
Sure.
Like, that's come home. This land that we're just adopting, and somebody else will adopt it again, right? Like, there's this constant, like, if you was to look up your location and where you're at now, this home might have been owned by 3 people before, right?
Sure.
So it's just an adoption process,
I love that. And what a great tie on this conversation, right? Everything from simplicity to growing to community, allyship, mentorship, all those things. So incredible, Mario.
It was fun.
I appreciate that. If people want to tune in, if people want to reach out, see what you're doing, be part of what Messy Roots is growing, all the amazing work you've done, what's the best way for them to contact you?
The best way would be messyroots.org, and then also it's me you could just email me. It's me at Jovan.com.
Awesome.
Yeah,
and I'll add that all in for people tuning in. So Mario, appreciate it.
It was great. I had a great time. I love that.